Welcome again to another session of the 17th Annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Ailes. You're stuck with me as the moderator. We're fortunate to have with us Amy Kuntz. Is it Kuntz or Kuntz? Kuntz?
Coons, the
Okay,
first one. Yeah.
Amy Kuntz, who is the Learning Innovation Strategic Initiative Coordinator. Boy, that doesn't fit well on a name tag. In the Teaching and Learning with Technology group at Penn State, and is also an adjunct instructor at Northampton Community College. He's responsible for leading the TLT Faculty Fellows Program that has 4 to 6 project teams conducting intensive course redesigns, planning process, and the Faculty Fellows community consisting of 60 plus former fellows and the annual Faculty Engagement Awards, where 10 to 14 faculty explore and incorporate innovative technologies in classes in a pedagogical manner and they share their findings. That's a lot of stuff. Um, no, she's involved a whole bunch of other stuff, but I'll turn it over to Amy, who's going to talk about immersive engagement, exploring special.io in higher education. Take it away, Amy.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for those who are in attendance right now and also watching in the recording. I am going to be sharing the slides so you don't have to take notes and have all that available to you. So the first thing is, as was mentioned, I'm part of a group called Teaching and Learning with Technology. We support Penn State University, which actually has 24 campuses spread throughout the state. There is this State College, which is in the center, which has around 40,000 students, but we have about 40 other we have other students throughout the state at smaller campuses, as well as those that teach online. And so we really support our on-ground students. However, we also support hybrid courses online with kind of a high-depth technology and more. And so where we come into play for Spatial IO is knowing that enrollments are declining, especially in Pennsylvania. We share courses that are for traditional age students, but are spread through a few different campuses that are probably about an hour away from each other. And so, how do we engage students in online courses? Um, to have it be more than just Zoom and to have that sense of presence and community. That was one element. Another element is how do we prepare our students who might be going into large corporations where they're going to have these experiential virtual spaces to interact in hybrid workforces and much, much more. So, for that faculty engagement awards that Bob Hales mentioned, one of the themes in 2023 was experiential virtual spaces. And so, what are these? They include a variety of aspects. It's a dynamic virtual environment, as you could see pictured on the right. You could either have avatars or you could have embedded live video similar to Zoom. The difference is when you are moving around the space, it uses a terminology called spatial sound. So when we're all in the room doing small groups, you can't hear one another because you're in the corners. But if I walk closer to someone, the louder I'm going to get and the more I could hear them. So it uses that same element called spatial sound. And then you also have free movement around the space. So one of the main goals was to focus on online courses to have the class feel like they're closer together, even though they are geographically far apart. But we did use it in a variety of courses, like I said, including in person. And so, what are some of the virtual space affordances? Some of the things that we looked at that it actually has been found to make it easier to relate to peers and improve relationships with the teacher. It also has found that by having students have that power of choice of where they walk around the space and how they engage with those various artifacts and elements, it has a better sense of engagement in the course. And then from a literature review, 48% found the impact of learning performance has increased, as well as student perceptions of satisfaction, and 30% increase of collaboration. And so there are some constraints, and that's why we're focusing on spatial I/O, as there's ever evolving spaces given the new nature of the tools. However, they do move from free to paid. So one of the tools was by Mozilla, similar to Firefox. It was called Mozilla Hubs, but then they actually sunsetted the product kind of out of nowhere. So we had to move to other platforms. There also is a larger learning curve to this type of modality versus Zoom or something similar like Microsoft Teams and the learning management system. And then it's also not widely adopted yet. So there's a lack of community of users to say, hey, we're doing this at Penn State. How are you doing this at your institution? And then while we are supporting this, we're focusing on free tools because there's no kind of pocket of extra money lying around to say, hey, we're going to dive into this. So there's some tools out there that have paid services and have support, but we're focusing on what is free and how can we go within the constraints of those free environments. So we're going to explore spatial I/O as that example, and then I'm going to go into some details about it. So the first is going into the tool itself, and I'm going to actually share this with you. So I didn't do this on purpose because I want to show you how easy it is to say, hey, I have this space, pop in here. So this is totally up to you. But if you want to join and explore where I'm currently at, feel free to click on the link. You might have to create an account. Or you could say guest and log in. So once you're here and are able to log in, you'll appear and I'll see that you're listed in this optional area. The one caveat, as you'll see, is there's kind of gamified elements on the right. So if you have younger children, you might say, oh, they do Roblox or they do Fortnite and things like that. It's kind of a gaming element for spatial, but there are educational ones too. The other thing is if you say, ah, I like this, but over here that's kind of annoying. The first thing is in the lower right-hand corner, you could change what the view is. And so you could have it be full screen or what's the theater view. So here I am. And then it would have a pop-up when you join of how to navigate. So I like to use the left, right, and arrow buttons. This is an art course, so you could see how I'm moving around the space. We have some of you who joined over here. Uh, and it does do like a default kind of name and a default look and feel, but you can personalize it. So this, I tend to have my hair up and be kind of casual. So I pick sneakers and other items. So you can see it's pretty easy to walk around the space. And then the other thing is if you wanted to connect the microphone, which we're not going to do, and say, we're meeting in this space alone and not Zoom, you could unmute and talk through here. And so that's really important. So you don't have to say, oh, we have to do Zoom and then log in here. You can just go in here and talk to one another. The other part is if people don't want to talk, you can type just like in similar platforms. You could say, hi, everyone, and have it being appearing. So you can see that there are some elements. And if you're like, oh, I don't know how to do stuff, if you press the three vertical dots, it does show you kind of ways to move, to show cameras, to unmute, show your actual live camera feed and here as well. So we're sticking with more of the basics of the avatars because that's what the students tend to gravitate towards. So as you'll see, this is one example of an art course, and I'll go over that a little bit later. And one of the caveats to here is it used to be free up to 35 participants at a time, but knowing that small companies need to make money as well, they changed it. And so recently they changed it to 10 participants at a time. And so working within those constraints, if you want to pay $8 a month and have the higher amount of students, you certainly can. Or you could have it be asynchronous where people come in here. Or you could have it be small groups that one group goes into this space, another group goes into this space. So we've been able to take the constraints of the free version and really plan for that with our faculty use cases. So I'm going to tab over here. Feel free to keep exploring the spaces, and I'll talk about some of the project overview and insights. So the first is 3 different art faculty used it in 3 different ways in an online asynchronous course. So the first was to how do we take these artifacts and have it be really great for peer review and seeing one another and having them feel like they're in an art museum. Outside of those 3 art faculty, there's some locations in Pennsylvania where there are art courses, but students might not have been to an art gallery and they might be 2 hours from an art gallery. So it's really hard to do artwork and explain how artwork can be displayed in a gallery if they've never experienced it. So it's giving them that tangible item of experiencing something firsthand to get more depth and perception. So the faculty number 1 was for students to create their own art museum. So if they had a passion about something, they could go research what are some artifacts and would I create a museum about a subject that's dear and near to me. So we're going to go over Brooks, which I have permission to share. And then each student, after they created their museum over multiple weeks, they then, during 1 week, had to visit each other's museum in spatial at a time of their choosing. They were able to give peer feedback, and they did this actually through Canvas so that way they could focus on the art and galleries without being overwhelmed with other information. So with this, it was really beneficial. And here's a quick screenshot. They did peer review in the discussion board. And the first semester, it was just trying to get them in. But then after that, there was like an optional time to say, hey, if you wanted to come in with other people, join Wednesday at 8 o'clock. So you can, even in an asynchronous class, offer opportunities to connect with one another. So one of the pieces of feedback from a student is I really enjoyed this interactive platform in Spatial IO, giving me a chance to create my own museum and opening a realm of possibilities to create something digital. It could help students exploring setting up various museums to their fullest of their creativities. And so Brooks, which again, you'll have access to later on. I don't want to do too many. So here she picked, there's different templates, and you could see the beach kind of goose theme. So there's some of animals over here. And you could see you do have the ability to say, hey, I want to sit and kind of take go in and zoom to um, closer. So if you're saying, hey, I want to check this out, you can and kind of pan up that way. Or you could actually press the plus button and have that be really even bigger. So that was the first example of the art faculty. Another one, and this is the space that I posted in the chat earlier, is using it for iterative creation process. This was done in Art 10, where students upload their 3 artwork ideas and an artist statement and provide 2 peers with feedback. So they're paired up with the same people throughout the semester, and this is done pretty much on a 3-week basis. So like, hey, you have 3 weeks to do your art, submit your ideas and your statement, and then get feedback. And so with that, you could see if you're in here, and again, you could zoom in. So this is someone's art pieces, their artifact, and then you could press the plus for it to be more legible for reading sake, and you could read it as is. And then you'll notice what's different here is sticky notes. So there is the possibility, and we have kind of how-to steps of how to add sticky notes. So to make sure we knew who it was, we kind of had these designated spots. So if Emma was assigned 44, so she knew exactly where to go every week to upload her work in section 44. The other aspect is some students signed off with who their name was, or they might have said, "Oh, well, I'm number 42. Check mine out." So that way you could kind of see and explore someone else's art style. So that way you kind of understood where they're coming from that feedback perspective. So this is some of the examples from the feedback for you to read. And so as you could see, the one in the middle, Lily, was number 36, and they got feedback from Paola, who was number 6. And so you could see, like, hey, I want to check out number 6 and how it relates to the feedback that they gave. And then, again, from the student perspective, this is feedback they got. I enjoyed looking at my classmates' artwork and reading about their thought process. They are so creative. I learned about different interpretations of the assignment prompt and also about other types of toys, such as a lizard made of beads. I really enjoyed this assignment. And this one, they had to do tactile of sewing things by hand. And so that was really nice to have that tangible piece. And the last one is Art 20. They did it very similar as the last one, so I'm not going to share it, but I did want to have it in here. And this one is nice because they have a portal where you could kind of teleport from room to room and space to space. So that way there was a shared space, and they have a D&D group that she's a mentor of, and so she had it linked there. So now that you've had a chance to kind of think about it from the art disciplines perspective, before we show examples from other disciplines, what do you see as some added benefits? So if you want to, feel free to type in the chat. And then if you'd want to unmute, we could also do that since it's a smaller group today.
Well, I find it a lot more fun and engaging than if I were just to read a paper describing it.
Yeah, great. Anyone else?
I did have an avatar walk right through
Oh,
something.
yeah. Yeah, sometimes that happens. It's some of them are glitchy, some of them are not. So someone said feels like a video game, like The Sims or something, which is very entertaining. So yeah, definitely the millennial-ish in me sees that as like the entertainment value. And two, I mentioned it towards the beginning, not everyone in the corporate sector is going to be using this in hybrid elements, but those who are at Northeast campuses and tend to be in business, they might decide to go and work in New York City, which tends to have the larger corporations, or Northern New Jersey that say, hey, you're hybrid and this is how we're going to meet. So it's trying to also prepare them for that skill set since they will encounter that possibly, depending upon the discipline. So in addition, we used it beyond online asynchronous courses and beyond art. So this was done in a hybrid course at Penn State Wilkes-Barre, and it was contemporary skills for business professionals. So to help create an artifact of, hey, I'm a small entrepreneur. How can I find resources in Northeast East Pennsylvania? They first created interviews of resources throughout the region. And they created a separate map of those. And then we also created a presentation gallery of the student work and spatial IO. So then during the hybrid day, during that designated time, students watched each video in the gallery and wrote a reflection piece about their experience. So at the initial time, there was the max that we had in place. And so we were able to accommodate everyone. Because of it being capped now at 10, we have kind of the first 30 minutes of the class, the next segment, and then the third, knowing that it's an hour and a half class. In addition, in Northeast PA, it's called the Greater Wyoming Valley Chamber of Commerce. So they then presented this the following week in person to the chamber to get their feedback about the gallery and gave feedback about their experience. Yes, go ahead, Bob.
So did the interviews actually play like the guy in the big screen? Did
Yep.
the video actually play within the
Yep, yep. So I'm going to show that right now. So here um, is that same. You'll see that some of these are very similar because of the templates that are used. So if I wanted to go here and play this video, you can actually play it, and it doesn't have to be like expanded. So if I wanted to see,
my name is Sue Riley, and I am the Executive Director for the Family Business Alliance.
Oh, that's very
It
cool.
is at Wilkes University and Penn State Scranton. What the family business.
So the nice thing about this is, like, let's say I play it, and but I have someone else logged in at a different area and wants to play it. Um, that spatial audio is okay, but if you could have all of these playing at once, so like see how these two videos are close to each other. You could have that echoey feel. So we did have them spread out in these other areas. And but sometimes if you come straight in here, you want to see everything all at once. So we've modified the space depending upon the timing of the year of where we want them to be. So if we know, hey, people are going to come in here asynchronously and kind of explore, so we could have videos close together. So only one will always probably be playing at one time. But if we are doing the presentation, or if we are doing it with the Chamber of Commerce, with potential entrepreneurs in Northeast PA, we then move these around so that they're like spread out in these other hallways. Great question. And so from this, students, even though it was a hybrid course, so they meet in person, and then once a week they meet online via Zoom. They stated that I liked experiencing and interacting with others online in an alternative to Zoom that has similar tools used by businesses for work purposes. By working with the chamber, I can also see how the space could be used for small businesses to showcase work, and I look forward to exploring this more. And so, one of the reflection pieces we had as yes, they presented in this, but they also had to watch it kind of asynchronously too. um, Later on, is taking it all in, and what's the benefit of this compared to just watching videos on YouTube or having it be housed in whatever platform, whether it's YouTube, Panopto, or Kaltura, or whatever media space your university has. So we use this from Harvard. It's more so for art-based work. But it can be adapted for virtual reality experiences and immersive experiences like this. It's called Project Zero at Harvard University, and it says, "What do you see?" and to describe what you're observing or seeing and thinking about. The next one is, okay, well, what do you think about it? During the experience, explain what you're thinking and how you're interpreting those elements. And then what do you wonder? During the experience, what are the questions that come to mind? And so from this, the feedback that we've gotten from students is kind of what you said, like with Sims, it's if they're a gamer, they see those gaming elements. If they are not a gamer, they say, oh, I could see how I'm like in this 3D realm. Items where it comes to what they think about it, they think that it's more immersive. The nice thing about this is if you want to join via a computer or a screen, you can. But there are ways, and in one of the examples that I'm not showing today, we actually had students join via a headset. And so it takes that sense of being there even more, because if we're all connected in VR equipment and we're not in the same room, it feels like we're right there and standing and walking around. So that's another portion of this. And then what questions come to mind? So as you saw in that example, is how can we apply it for small businesses to showcase their work? And other ones included landscape design. You could show pictures of landscape, but it can, if you can make it this like 3D model in the real world and walk around it, how can that be and what can you do? And so showing that this can be used for other ways as well. And then I'll actually do a demo of how to create a space for you and share it with others. So the next one is a communications course. So students, it was first for small group communications, but now is done for the honors course of Introduction to Speech. So not just speech, we communicate in many different ways. And that the realm of being succinct and getting your point across is so important now than ever. And so preparing students how to take what maybe be a lengthy idea and thought process and to truncate it down. So they first worked on creating their infographics and making it visual and concrete. And then the faculty member uploaded each of the infographics to the art gallery, Spatial IO. And similarly, this again was a in person, but then hybrid course. So with that, because of the large class size, we had it over 2 weeks. So the hybrid group, again, to fit in the constraints of 10, we had 10 people the first half of class of the hour, then the second half, another 10, and then the following week, the remaining. So up to 40 students. And so we had supplemental work. It didn't matter what order they did the other assignments. So on the other day that they weren't here, they were still doing the equivalent amount of work for the week. In addition, the Penn State Scranton campus does an in-person annual research fair. So undergraduate students can present their research, and some of the key members who do great work for infographics are able to present it to the larger Penn State Scranton community, which is really nice. And so even for the in-person research fair, they have a dedicated VR room, not just transformable ones like this, the Quest. They even have a different technology that's a little bit dated, of older VR equipment that's tethered to a computer, that they have, and have people can explore these spaces as if they're really there. And so to show what that looks like is this one. And again, each of these you'll have access to either in the slide deck, it's a QR code, or in the notes, it has the link to the actual space. And so what we've been able to do, and we just move these around, is to show kind of some of the examples that are at the research fair. We are doing this again in 2 weeks' time. So we're going to take everyone else's, we always do all 40 students, and then we then parse it down for the research fair. And so knowing that we had the Super Bowl, this is one example of concussions and player protocols, and what does that look like? So concussions in the NFL. And then again, just as before, like the artwork, if we're like, oh, I can't read the tininess of that screen, how can I get to it? You could press and actually make it large so that it appears for everyone. So that is for CAS 250 and small groups. So now I'm going to talk about things to consider for the exploration and creation process, and then I will do a demo of how to do the technical aspects for creating it. So the first is have an idea aligned to the experience that serves the course goals and objectives, or solves some type of challenge you may have, or enhances the learning experience. We really try to say, don't use technology for technology's sake. Our motto is people before pedagogy, and then pedagogy before technology. So having a purpose for using technology. And so with that, some of the other examples was that I'll share in the resources is we had some classes, this was when there was no 10-person limit initially, where they all joined in Spatial IO instead of Zoom. So with that, you want it to really be, hey, we're not going to go into Spatial IO and I'm going to be mainly lecturing you. You want it to be hands-on or small group or moving around the spaces. And so this is still being done in some courses, including a course on gaming called Game 180. And so there are times where they meet via Zoom, and then there are some other times where they join in a Spatial IO, depending upon the class and what's going to be taught for that specific day. So they did end up paying, the amount is $8 a month, which is, I know it's a cost, but it is minimal. So now I'm going to go over how to create the Spatial IO space, and then talk about some resources and some questions. So the first thing is, if you're in here, is to say, hey, if you want to create a space, you could go to new space. you could create a blank one, but there also is no code template. So if you saw a lot of people gravitate towards this aisle gallery for some reason, but there's other ones, including the boardroom and other elements. So anything that's premium, you have to pay that $8 a month. So we're all about free. And so if I want this Mountain Lodge, you would just click that. The other one is if you like a certain gallery, that you could also change the color. So this one has pink and red and blue. And the reason why you saw the aisle gallery in different perspectives is some might want to have a brick, some might want it to be white. So you kind of hover over which you want. And then from there, you click on create space. The next thing is it thinks about it and it gives you the generic, your name's virtual world. So if you click on settings, you could edit the space info to say Amy's online office hour space and change it to whatever you wish. And from there, you could kind of manipulate. So it has these predetermined areas if you wanted to just upload an image pretty easily. And so you would attach it as you were attaching an image to an email or a file to an email or something of the like. And so the other part, if you're saying, okay, well, I don't like these. Students are going to say, oh, what is that upload file? I want to get rid of them. Or, oh, I want to add something else. The other part is the pencil. So the pencil, you can delete different frames. If any of you have used image editing software like Adobe Cloud, it's similar to that approach where it has layers. So it's always afraid that you're going to delete something that you might not want to. So it has a little lock. If you press it and it's an open lock, then you can manipulate it. And so you could press delete and it always asks you, are you sure? Because unfortunately, there is no undo button. And so from here, uh, you can do that and kind of rename and do other elements. The other part is if you wanted to add something. And so if you wanted to add something, there are a few different ways to do it. I like to stick with just adding content. And it adds it takes anything your kind of media gallery, it's all of your spaces. So that infographic space I technically own, but share rights to with the faculty member. And so you can upload your own items. If you're saying, well, how did the students know how to add a sticky note? If you press add item and add note, that will do the sticky note. And so and it puts it to whatever you're looking at. So you'll see it's kind of in space right now, kind of like hanging out in there. So when you're doing this, you're like, oh, how does that work? Some of the directions, which I will also share, allow you to manipulate the space. So here, if you click on it, it's doing the rotation like a clock left to right. Scale, making it bigger. So if I want it to be huge, you can. And then the position of the X, Y, and Z axis. So if you're like, oh, I don't know which one it is, you could always just manipulate. And so um, I want it to be like 11.575. So 8 would be 11, negative 11.8 would have it be against the wall. And so you can also drag it around, but sometimes then it changes the rotation. So it's something to finesse for sure, but we try to make sure students have adequate time. So one's the art gallery where they do sticky notes, they do the sticky notes every single week. So yes, they have to learn it once in the beginning, but then they get into the swing of things. For the other art example where they create their own gallery. They have multiple weeks, and we have kind of that structured assignment that is spread throughout of how to add and create their gallery in adequate time. And then sometimes, such as the infographic example and the multimedia videos, it's the faculty member that does the legwork of putting the items up for the student. So it really depends upon what your content is, what you're trying to get at, and the focus for that element in that section. Some other things really quickly for adding content. If you wanted to just create your own space and make it homey, they have pre-made furniture that you could add. And you could also bring in 3D artifacts via a separate technology called Sketchfab. So if you teach history and want to see an artifact that is 3D and you could kind of walk around it, it probably exists on Sketchfab. A lot of the Smithsonian museums have artifacts there on Sketchfab that you could take and look at and manipulate, and more. And then there's other ones beyond that put that part. And so if you're saying, okay, well, what's Sketchfab and how do I do it? I want to highlight another resource that we have at Penn State called the Experience Catalog. So we have 360 videos and VR experiences. But during the pandemic, we created what was called I'm Excursions because we were kind of locked in these spaces, and students maybe would have done a quick study abroad during spring break, or they might not have the means to ever go someplace. So these were created for kind of all those concepts in mind. And so if you wanted to explore Costa Rica, it talks about understanding Costa Rica from a food, art, culture perspective, history, politics, and more. But what I wanted to show for this part is those examples of Sketchfab artifacts. So here, this is from Sketchfab. It's a painted bowl, and we're going to let it load. And so I know this is not in Spatial IO, but you can have it be if you would like it to be. So let's let this load on up. And we'll make it, I'm going to stop sharing, share it in full screen. So here, it's loading. And then you could, in this view, you could turn it around and manipulate it. So here, I can use my computer screen to be like, okay, well, what does the bottom look like? What does the inside look like, etc. But in Sketchfab, you could have it be plopped down on a table and then physically walk around that space. So if you do this, I always like to try to have both because you might not see all the details and intricacies. But one of the things that we're doing right now is working with an art historian to work with students who will work in historical societies throughout Pennsylvania and beyond of how do we take these and put them in there. And then how do we also stretch spatial IO? Like how do we create a 3D scan of stuff that is in a local historical society and then make a spatial IO space that allows them to have these artifacts so that way people around the world can view them and see them. So that's kind of where we're going in this space as like the next step of how do we take it one step further. So is there any questions about creating spatial IO spaces before I wrap things up? Okay, and then if you're saying, okay, well, you mentioned the paid version, what does that mean? If you press upgrade, it just shows you what it is. So the free version, there's a content limit of 100 megabytes. Um, that is actually okay. Where you saw all those videos, we were able to put up videos and we're able to truncate them so they were smaller, to still stick with that basic plan. The only caveat is those 10 participants and those basic templates that I showed you. There was nice, fun other ones that said premium. And you could see that the paid version is, yes, paid, but not too much. So it's $8 a month. And that way it has 50 participants and you could have more storage and then access to those premium templates. The last part that I want to demo in Spatial IO is how do you get students in here? So you can press share, and then if you want to have it be specific students, if you're afraid of someone jumping in here that you don't want it to be, you could invite specific people. Or if you're like, okay, I trust that nobody will send this out to other people, you could just say, anyone with the link and then copy the link. So then that way I could send this as an announcement to my students and have them join when I say for them to join or explore during the week that I want them to do. Um, so with that, when you're thinking about taking advantage of Spatial IO, think about your course modality. Again, we had online asynchronous. I kind of talked about the online synchronous one, as well as hybrid and in-person. Will you be doing a lot of, if you're going to meet in this space instead of someplace else, make sure that you do a lot of small group and not a lot of lecturing. And then if you are doing it asynchronous or in person or hybrid, is it going to be like a poster session? Are you going to have galleries of images under video? And how are you going to prepare your students and make that connection back to the classroom? Then also, how will you take advantage of the free movement around the space? So you'll see that in many of those galleries, we have them spread out so that way they walk around and not just stay where they joined. And then think about student computer prerequisites. So I teach an introduction to technology course for about 19 years now. And often we think college-based students know how to do certain elements, and that's not necessarily the case. They might not know how to upload a file or how to join, or they might be joining on a Chromebook or try to be taking a class on an iPad instead of a computer. So think about having clear instructions about what are the technical prerequisites as well as the skill sets to join this space. So that's all I have. I know that we have 2 items in the chat, so let me ask those. So I have a lot of students who have trouble with internet speed. Has this been a problem in your experience? So for some students and the live where everyone joins, it was, but we had that be for online courses, that was a prerequisite to have that higher connection. Other than that, even in the Pocono Mountains, there tends to be sometimes even low speed internet, and they've all been able to do the parts, especially when it's asynchronous and even being able to play the video that might have to buffer a little bit, but it hasn't been a problem. And then the other question, are all permissions the same for everyone in the space, or are there different roles? So great question. I will go back to here. So you can, in the settings, um, either allow people to edit or not. And so that's like a toggle switch. And under host settings, you could say, well, what can they do? Um, so it's kind of an all or nothing, like um, either they have it or they don't. And so what we've done is I've had, and that's why I have the infographics. I had the space to teach the faculty member of how to upload infographics, and we were able to do it together. And then he was able to make a copy of it. So he didn't have to start from scratch in his own account and then add more and more as they go on. Great question. And maybe I have yet to, again, I've done the free, so maybe in the paid models, there might be more, but I stick with what's free. So great question. Can the gallery be extended to allow for wall space? There are ways to manipulate it. It takes probably a more technical skill set. So I don't know if the necessary like students or even faculty member would do this, but maybe partnering with if you have somebody who's more into multimedia to do that element. And then two, when you click on new spaces to choose, I think while this is aesthetically pleasing because you have the outside space, the ones that were more like this Aries gallery or Obsidian tend to have more wall space going on. And then two, I know this was more avatar based, but there are other platforms. Um, well, which I'll have in the presentation. Another tool is called Art Steps. And so that one you could manipulate the spaces a lot easier than spatial IO, but it's really hard to do on VR based equipment. Great questions. So really quickly, if you're interested in this and learning more, the IMAX catalog that I showed that had kind of some of those 3D artifacts is listed here. For the art faculty, they did some research on their own and they published a paper. And then if you want to know about some of those other spaces, this is a recap. And so it includes tools and two other examples from faculty members that used more of that Mozilla Hubs, or it was another tool called Spatial Chat, different from Spatial IO, for you to explore at that point. So I want to be mindful of time. Is there any other questions or comments? Until I welcome reaching out. I have my contact information here, and then I put the slides in the chat. And I know Bob and I were talking beforehand that he'll put the slides up on the website for the conference.
Well, it'll be interesting when the way things are advancing, those avatars really become very real looking figures. It'll happen.
Yeah, and I think for spatial IO, they've done that. When it was Mozilla Hubs, a lot of them were like robotic or the options were like a fox or something quirky. So um it was really like it was nice to have at that point, but I think they've gotten to be more human elemental based from time to time, and it'll only continue.
Well, I think that's a wrap then. Amy, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
This is really interesting. I bookmarked the site, play with it a little.